Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Friday night devotional. Tom is off tonight, so I'm sorry to say you get me. Now, this past Wednesday night, we mentioned that on this Bible Lands trip, I was able to go to the pool of Bethesda just inside the Sheep's Gate, or the Eastern Gate, in the old city of Jerusalem. And what made reference to what Jesus did at this pool of Bethesda that we read about in John chapter 5. And so just to remind you what happens there, Jesus comes into this place, this pool, the pool of Bethesda, and it says in verse 3 that in these porches lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now, just from a comparative standpoint, what does God expect his faithful people to do today for a healing of their souls? There is a washing, a immersion into water, baptism, that is connected to our spiritual healing that we as Christians do today. Just point that out really quickly. Moving on. It says in verse 5, now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. That's a long time to have any kind of infirmity. We don't know exactly what infirmity that he has, but when it says in verse 6, when Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that he had already been in that condition for a long time. So we don't know if there were physical signs of it or if Jesus, just being Jesus, knows that he's had this for a long time. And he says to him, Jesus does, do you want to be made well? Then the sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. So we're led to believe then that he wants a healing. He desperately desires a healing, but because of his infirmity or his disease, he can't get there fast enough for the healing. He said there is no one there for him. And that's the part I want to hone in on this evening. You know, we don't like to admit it, but we do need other people. We need other people sometimes to help us through tough things, to encourage us, to stand by us. And this man needed someone to care for him enough to help him get to the water for the healing. And yet it appears that for at least some portion of 38 years, no one was willing to do that. Would you have been willing to do that? Would you have gone down to the pool of Bethesda and surrounded yourself with all of these sick people and the lame and the blind and the paralyzed? Would you have gone down there and said, how can I help you get into this water for a healing? Well, I think most of us would say, yeah, I would do that. Well, if we're willing to do that, then why wouldn't we also be willing to take a few extra steps to help people reach the waters of healing that are a more significant healing from a more eternal consequence? Would you be that person? Jesus says later in the account that, see, you have been made well, sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. So Jesus sees the man that has been healed after following his instruction to take up his mat and walk. Jesus heals him and says, sin no more, lest a worse thing. You see, there are worse things than being paralyzed. There are worse things than being steeped in disease, and that's being eternally lost. And so we as Christians need to make sure that we are aware of what's going on around us and the eternal consequence of the sins of people that maybe even be our neighbors that have not yet laid those sins down at the foot of the cross and washed them away in baptism. So I want to encourage you this weekend, as we make our way into the weekend, that we see opportunities and take them to be the person that other people need to get to the healing waters of Jesus Christ.